Sure.
I'm listening, and I've read this, but I'm going to sign these for you.
You go right ahead.
Okay. And I read the agenda twice.
That's it?
At least twice.
All right, it's that time. I'm sorry about my tardiness. We had another meeting between me and Dr. Durante. So we move on to starting this. We need to approve the meeting agenda. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, passes. Do I have community comment at this time? All right. So we'll move on to item number 2, policy 903. I think it is ready to go. With conversations with the community, I do believe maybe 5 minutes might be a little too long. I'm going to motion that we move it to 4 minutes. That puts it 1 minute over the 3 and 1 minute under the 5. Do I have any agreement to that?
I think that's fine.
I support that too, Mr. Corman. My only question is if we go to 4 minutes and we had 12 people, 15 people give 4, that would give us 60 minutes. Are we limiting the number of people, or what am I to do as chairman at this time to give everyone a fair shot, I guess? What's our plan?
903 does have a clause that allows you to extend the time if need be. Like if you say how many more people do we have, and we have 8 more cards, we
Right.
can extend it for 8 more cards. If we have 20 more cards, we might want to call for a special meeting just on that topic.
So as board president, if I'm serving that role, I would have that option to do that, or I would ask the board to vote to do that.
You'd ask us when to vote to do that.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that clarification. I mean, if there's 1 more card, I think I'd let it roll. But if there's 10 more cards, then we might need to give the board a chance to have input.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I understand.
So do I have a second when making that modification?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Motion passes. All right, I'm going to motion to move this to the full board then. Do I have a second on that?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Motion passes. 903 is moved to the board. All right, I'm bringing up item number 3. I just had a conversation with the school solicitor, and he wants some time to look at 235 after a conversation that Dr. Durante, the solicitor, and I had. Can I motion to table this pending the solicitor's further input?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Sure.
Aye.
Okay. All right. Item 4, policy new. So this is a proposal for a new policy. As of right now, we don't really have any clear policies on the athletic department. So I would like permission and ideas to go to the athletic department and start drafting a draft policy to bring to the committee to put guide rails for the athletic department.
Isn't there a 37-page document that is already in place for the athletic department and committee?
That's athletic rules, that's not actually policy.
Okay.
There's a difference between rules and policy. Rules can be changed by the administrator in charge of them, where policy has to be changed by the board and has to be followed by everybody. Does that make sense?
Yes. I mean, they're operating under something at this point. They have guidelines and rules and things that they do, but if we need to define it more, I don't see any problem looking into it.
Yeah, so the purpose would be to define it more. I talked to Dr. Durante about this, and he said, they already have a system in place. They've had to change the system because of things that have happened within the district. And I'd like to have a refined system that makes it mandatory certain things are done or certain personnel things can be done. Does that make sense? So, do I have a motion to allow the creation of a new policy for the athletic department?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Policy 105.1, this is curriculum review by parents, guardians, and students. I'm hoping everybody had a chance to read that policy tonight. I think that we need to modernize that particular policy to reflect modern technologies. Do I have any discussion on that?
Is the intent, Mr. Corman, that every piece of the curriculum for the entire 180 days is in place before day one? Or is there flexibility for the teacher to work in current topics, things that might be relevant? I just think back to my own teaching. Sometimes you had a topic of the day came up. Is that going to be able to be permitted to be interjected, or it's cut in stone and it's like a rock and you just teach the rock?
No, I would like for it to be adaptable to
Okay.
current events and other factors. That's why I want to relook at it, modernize it, and make sure it fits the technology and the times.
Because a lot of times you would plan, but then you would plan based upon a week, let's say, and then you might be ahead or behind, and then something comes up, or you have a snow day, or who knows, and you have to adjust the curriculum to meet the schedule sometimes.
Yeah, I think, like those snow days, you usually don't get the whole curriculum in that snow day because it's shortened. So that would still be covered under curriculum. But for anything new or anything that needs to be added, because they found some, they might have found some great material they want to use in the classroom, there should be a process. So we have to spell out a process for that to be part of the classroom. Where, you know, maybe there's a probationary period where you can use it, but you still have to go through the process and get it approved.
Okay, thank you.
And that's what I was looking at, was those type of suggestions or modernizing your class. Anybody else have anything?
I do have a few things, if you don't mind. There's a list partway down the policy. The following conditions shall apply to any request. Number 1, no more than one request per semester may be made by any parent, guardian, or student for each enrolled child. I really think that should just disappear. I don't know why we would limit a parent to one request if their child, or they have multiple children. Why would they be limited? And especially if we do a better job of having these resources collected in a organized way, we should be able to do that and provide those easier. So I really don't see the point in limiting to one request.
Is there any more suggestions? 105.1.
Also, number 3 on that list, the written request will be sent to the building principal. Given our feedback on communication lately, I think that maybe if a parent or guardian inquires of any staff, that they should be able to, if they are unable to fully satisfy the request, they could forward the request. Emails are easy to forward. Teacher, any staff member receives such a request, they should be able to add the request, send the request on to the principal rather than putting the weight on the parent. Sometimes parents are unaware of what our policies are.
So you're suggesting to streamline the process so that it's easier for the parents to figure out what's
Yes,
entailed in
I
the
think it
process.
should be every staff's responsibility to be able to forward that request to the responsible party.
Would you be happy with just like the staff that interacts with that particular student? So let's say, you know, you're putting in a request to a science teacher, but that kid doesn't have science. So we limit that to the teachers that the child currently has.
Sure. I would think it probably would be anyway, naturally, because that's who the parent would talk to, I would assume.
I would assume so.
Unless it was a different administrator that they were talking to at the time.
Do you have any suggestions for modernization of the policies, such as requirements on reporting or?
On number 6, No parent or guardian or student shall be permitted to remove the material provided for review or photocopy the contents of such file. The taking of notes by parents or guardians and students is permitted. Also, at this point, most of our things are digital. I would think that we could just add that they couldn't copy them if they're copyrighted, if there is some restriction. Otherwise, they should be allowed to do so. Any school district curated materials should be able to be handed over. I think we should be able to put these items on a file for them and share them digitally. Perhaps that would satisfy the request and we wouldn't even have to do the little sit down like this policy implies. But if it can be put on a digital format and given out in a file, I think that should be done.
Is there any reason other than copyright that we wouldn't change the curriculum to be parent? I'm just honestly curious. Is there any reason other than the issue of copyright that we wouldn't want to do the curriculum to be parent? I know if I was a parent, I would be concerned if my kid in school that I was not allowed to do the curriculum or not allowed to copy it, and really wonder why. Other than the copyright agreement, I would understand that.
I think several members of the board have been asking and wanting the curriculum to be listed online. We do have some of our curriculum maps listed online, but the additional items associated with the lesson plans, things like that, those are not. I think we could be modernizing. There's probably a lot that could be done in that department that we can be putting more on for parents to see. That may eliminate some of the questions from the beginning.
And let me make this clear, we're not saying that parents should have the ability to review and copy any test quizzes or exam material.
Correct.
I think that is specifically laid out, if not in this policy, in one of the policies that instruction teachers in 93 maybe.
235.
I want to remember that specifically laid out that instruction materials.
If we get to lesson plans being posted, listed, whatever, would that be done gradually over time? Because I don't think it's fair to expect a teacher to know what lesson plan they're going to do 20 weeks from now. How are we going to handle that? That every lesson plan is to date and up to date with any additional resources that far in advance. I mean, a lot of times teachers will plan for a month and then revise it for a week. I mean, but if you ask the teacher to say, what's your lesson plan for May 10th, and we expect that online August 20th of the year before, that might be unrealistic. I'm just voicing an opinion on that. I didn't plan a year in advance. I planned a month to a week in advance, I guess, would be a good way to put it. But I'll yield to the teachers too. I think we have to have enough flexibility built into it that the teacher has the right, I'm not saying to change the curriculum, but to revise maybe how they're going to deliver that information.
No, I agree, there has to be some flexibility built in, but as long as it ultimately gets put up there for parents to view, I'm sure they'll be happy about that. There would have to be a process for that flexibility. That way we make sure that the materials being used adhere to the district policy and speak correct. Is that what you're looking for?
Yes, I just think we need to give, it may take a year to implement the entire curriculum online or to put it in form so that everyone feels comfortable with it.
Yeah, I expect it'll take a while to do that. I mean, if any change in this policy would have to have some sort of, we haven't done this before, so we're giving extra time for this to be done. So there would have to be some, just like a recent court case where maybe the judge gave too short of a time limit. We'd have to work with the partners on this, and we'd have to work with the teachers and the administration to come up with a time frame that's reasonable.
Thank you.
I think I just would like to point out some of this discussion kind of crosses over with the policy 105, which is specifically on curriculum, which does define what curriculum is. Maybe the definition needs worked on, but according to the current definition of curriculum, curriculum shall be defined as a series of planned instruction aligned with established academic standards in each subject that is coordinated, articulated, and implemented in a manner designed to result in achievement of academic standards at the proficient level by all students. So we see that it is a series of planned instruction. So we often get what we have been seeing to actually approve, when we reapprove new curriculum, we see a map which is very sparse. And I would say we don't see, as the board, we see nothing more than you see as the public. There's no additional, audio visuals or whatever's listed on that curriculum map is all we see as well. So there's no additional texts or anything that we're provided that everything we see the public sees, or we don't see anything more than you do, let's put it that way. So that being said, I think, this series of planned instruction might need a little further definition, but it seems to me that the majority of what we're going to be teaching and what we're going to be showing the students should already be planned at the beginning of the year. The next line says the board shall be responsible for the curriculum of the district schools. So if the board is going to be responsible for it in some way, I would hope that the board would see it.
No, I agree with that. And I eventually plan on revisiting 105 itself, but I just wanted to get some 105.1 changes done to modernize it in preparation for some minor changes to 105 later. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Along those lines, the second paragraph under guidelines, upon request by parent, guardian, or student, the district will make available existing information about the curriculum, including academic standards to be achieved, instructional materials, and assessment techniques. And I think instructional materials needs to be elaborated on there. I think the word all existing information needs to be added. And we really just need to define that all things includes if it is shown in class to the student, if the student is going to see it, the requester will see it whenever this request is made and when the requester makes the request and comes in to see it. I personally had these issues myself. Requested materials, did not see all of the materials that then later I saw at home on the computer.
I'm not a teacher myself, maybe there's an art, could correct me if I'm wrong, but I imagine that at the beginning of the year or throughout the year, they're given a curriculum of some sort, teacher's manual, I don't know, that's how it worked when I was in school. That's the type of stuff I would like to see on the website, rather than just strictly curriculum maps. I imagine they're giving more than just a curriculum map. I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong. It seems like there's more material somewhere. When we curriculum, do we just create a map, or is there more to it? Because all we're seeing is the maps.
Well, the board approves the resources,
Correct. The board approves the resources, so the teachers take the resource of the map and create everything from there?
pretty much.
All right, so I got some good suggestions for policy 105.1. I also don't want to reinvent the wheel. So if one of the policy committee members would like to take on responsibility with researching other policies from other districts that are similar to this one to see if you can come up with something, if they have something better already worked out, I'd like to volunteer for that.
I can volunteer for that.
I'd like to make a motion to allow policy committee members to research and make paragraphs to try to fit these goals, and have them available for next meeting for policy committee review, and then try to recreate policy from those suggestions in the paragraphs. Do I have a second on that?
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Motion passes. All right, the following items are information items. These are things we're going to be looking at very soon. These are things that were brought up either by other committees suggestions by parents, suggestions by admin. And the 2 items I have right now was A, bullying policies review and strengthen, and B, policy on anti-bullying teams. I know one of the policies that we need to have in place already has working with an anti-bullying team. So we're going to take that and refine it a little bit better. So I think those will be on the agenda for next time. So be prepared with suggestions, comments, and wants and wishes. Do I have any public comment at this period? All right, we'll move on to closing statements. Dr. Ryan, do you have any closing statements?
I do not, sir.
Mr. Wardle, do you have any?
I would just like to thank the public for coming this evening and at least observing what's happening, and all the members of the committee for working towards some good solutions. Thank you.
Julie, do you have any public comments?
Yeah, I have a few things. I just would like to point out that policies 816 and 706, we had talked about them before on the website. I just checked them tonight. They still have incorrect dates that are not the dates that they were actually revised last. They were typed as typos, so if those could be fixed, that would be great. We also have a policy that is by law to be reviewed annually that we still don't have that exists. That's policy 830.1, so we need to revisit that.
Which policy is that?
Let me see here. That is data storage and security. And then also policies 103 and 104, those I think are supposed to be reviewed every 3 years. They are over the 3-year mark, so those should be looked at soon. And then I also have an article from PSBA that they sent out in their magazine about respecting parental rights in the classroom. This was a suit between Tatel et al. And Mount Lebanon School District. And in March of 22, a first grade teacher observed Transgender Awareness Day by reading non-curricular books and presenting non-curricular gender identity topics to her students, which I won't go any further into how that went down, but anyway, a few parents were not happy about those rights of their students being overlooked. So in conclusion, after that, basically the PSBA article says, given the length and breadth of the decision and the complexity of these issues, school boards and school administrators should consult with their solicitors to discuss this decision and its implications. It is suggested that rules need to be put in place prohibiting teachers from going off the script of the school district approved curriculum and providing training regarding what can and cannot be said in the classroom by teachers. And I personally think, based on my own personal experiences in the district with my students, that is extremely important for us to look at. So we'll be asking you for some assistance on that probably.
I'm very familiar with that case.
Thank you, Julie. David, do you have a comment? I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight and sitting through this. We are trying to modernize and update all the policies. It's going to be a slow process. I do know that our school solicitor has a bunch of policy updates that he forwarded to Dr. Durante. Since the administration is recommending that we don't need to go through the policy committee, the administration does have that power to take policy directly to the board. And I look forward to seeing those policies on the agenda at some point. Thank you. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great.
Good evening, everyone. The rest of the board members are welcome to join us up front now. We're going to move into Finance Committee meeting. Mrs. Christy Lenz is going to lead that, but I'll wait till everyone has a chance to reach their seat.
Plenty of room.
It's gonna get worse. Or get better, maybe more.
Yeah. Need any more, let me know. Slide down.
Try to keep it.
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Finance Committee meeting for March 17th here at the Big Spring School District. If you're joining us online, we welcome you. I'd like to call that meeting to order at this time. And it's after 6:30, so we're not running far behind, but it's 6:39. And I'll call the meeting to order. Is there any public comment in regards to the Finance Committee meeting agenda for March 17th, 2025? Hearing none, we'll move into presentation. Mrs. Christy Lentz, our business manager, hasn't been here real long, but long enough to get a feel for where we're at. This is one of several Finance Committee meetings, as well as updates that we'll receive as we prepare for the budget for 25-26. She's going to give us an update of where we're at year end, and then look at where we're looking to go with 25-26 budget. So Mrs. Lentz, we appreciate the time you put in. Tonight's kind of information to get started. We can ask a few questions and she can go back and look at it, but we will have more updates very soon so that we can prepare. I think there's a handout at your seat that you can look at, the PowerPoint she's going to present. So Mrs. Lentz, thank you for your work and thank you for bringing us up to date.
Good evening, everyone. Is this working?
No, it's not on.
Check 1, 2.
Thank you. So tonight we're going to start, before we start to look at the 25-26 budget, we're going to look at where we ended the fiscal year, the 23-24 school year. So just a high-level summary, you can see for the 23-24 school year, we ended with revenues of about $65.7 million. We also then ended with expenses of about $60.6 million that left us with a surplus from the 23-24 fiscal year of about $5.1 million. Just want to, before I go into details of what that surplus entailed, just keep in mind it's not advised when a school district ends with a surplus to use that for reoccurring expenses. Your surpluses should be considered to be used for the more one-time expenditures. Because if you find yourself using that for reoccurring expenditures, you can certainly get yourself in trouble because then you can't keep up with your costs over time if you use your surplus for those reoccurring expenses. So you might wonder why. Why did the school district end with a $5.1 million surplus in 23-24? You can see below some of the main contributions to that is the district had budgeted about $10.9 million in basic education funding. However, we received about $12.1 million. And that was the historic state giving school districts additional money into their budgets through basic education funding formula. So we ended with about a $1.2 million surplus in our basic education funding line item. And then interest, we had budgeted $350,000, and we ended up receiving $1.4 million in interest earnings, which was a surplus to the budget of just shy of $1.1 million. Keep in mind that if we continue to spend down reserves, the interest earnings will drop, and then if the economy goes into a downturn, obviously then interest rates will drop, and we will not receive as much interest earnings. Some other areas where we received additional revenue above budget was our earned income line item of about $457,000 and our interim real estate line item of about $405,000. And then on the expense side, you can see our pupil services or special education budget have budgeted a 9.1 million in expenses, but they only came in at 7.6 million, or a $5.5 million surplus to our budget. Salaries and wages, object codes 100 and 199. We budgeted 21.4 million. They came in at 20.9 million. We had a surplus there of 428,000. And then there was a budget for 175,000 to transfer into the capital reserve. I will apologize, when I came on board, the audit was, I'm going to say, probably 80% complete. I did not realize that they had budgeted for this transfer, so that transfer did not get made into the capital reserve. We can still do that if the board so chooses, but that did add to the surplus of 5.1 million. I also wanted to point out that this 5.1 million, hopefully we won't see that in the future, because the district, prior to me coming on board, and then, for the next fiscal year, our basic education funding, we did bump that up to reflect actuals now that we know, the governor gave us that historic funding, and they reset our base at just over $12 million. So we have that in the 24-25 budget, and we reflected that in the 25-26 budget. So that surplus of about 1.2 will be no longer, because we budgeted closer to actual. Interest earnings, we did bump that up in 24-25 to about $680,000. So again, that surplus will decrease in the interest line item, and I kept that the same for the 25-26 budget. Moving on to the 25-26 budget update. Starting with our revenues. Up top, I have summarized our revenues in terms of what we call functions. So some of you may know, some of you may not, but just a quick high level before I get into the budget. School districts are governed by the Pennsylvania Department of Education, and we have to abide by what they call the chart of accounts, or an account code structure. So the district has a 27-digit account code structure divided into 9 segments. So you might hear me sometimes say a fund, a function, an object, a source code, or building level. We have to budget down to those details. And so there's many ways that we can segment or report out on a budget. So for our revenues, I'm going to report what I call by function. So your local revenues fall in the function of the 6,000 functions. So for fiscal year 25, we budgeted 40.2 million in local revenue. For the 25-26 budget, we're currently proposing 40.27 million, or an increase of about $64,000. And what that $64,000 is I looked at our current assessed value, and it appears that we are growing in our assessed value. So during the 24-25 budget, we were about 1.97 billion in assessed value. We are now up just over 2 billion in assessed value. So that's where that $64,000 comes from. Before I go any further, you can see off to the right-hand side, there's like a legend. So if you're wondering what is encompassed in our local revenues, this is not all inclusive, but it gives you some of the highlights of what we include in our local revenues, which is our real estate, current and delinquent, public utility, payment in lieu of taxes, local service tax, earned income tax, interest earnings, emissions to gains, student organization membership dues, our grant funding through IDEA, and then we have some other miscellaneous receipts. So then on our state revenue line item, which is function 7,000, for the 24-25 budget, we budget about 23.7 million. For the 25-26 budget, currently looking at 23.2 million, or a decrease of about 541,000. That 541,000 you can see down below where those differences are coming into play. So for basic education funding for the 24-25 fiscal year, it was at 12.8 million. When I look at what our base is for Big Spring School District, I reduced it to the base at this point because we're not sure if the state's going to give us any extra money. So I budgeted that at 12.4 million, which is $382,000 less than the current year budget. special education, we currently budgeted 2.5 million. Based on what we're receiving for this current fiscal year, I budgeted that flat at 2.6, so it would add about 120,000 to the budget. The rental and sinking fund payment, that comes from, previously we had a bond where we got Plan Con money or reimbursement in for our debt service. We paid off that bond in this fiscal year, so that revenue that we get to help reduce the bond payment is no longer. So I pulled about $500,000 out of the budget. Safety and security grants, that's the BCCD grants. We're not sure at this point if we will continue to get that grant, so I pulled that revenue out as well. Our Ready to Learn block grant, which is where the state put the adequacy money through that formula. Previously, we were getting about $401,000 in Ready to Learn block grant money. However, we did get adequacy money in this current fiscal year, so that bumps up our Ready to Learn block grant base up to $672,000. So we won't lose that money, so I went ahead and bumped that line item up. So that's about a $270,000 increase. And then, of course, as our wages go up, so does our cost in Social Security and retirement, but we also get a portion of that money back through the state. So I budgeted an increase in our state share subsidy for Social Security and retirement. So that is what makes up the difference up above that you can see of the $541,000. And then again, off to the right-hand side, some of our state revenues include our basic and special education funding, vocational education subsidy, transportation subsidies, Social Security and retirement subsidies, the property tax allocation fund, Ready to Learn block grant. We get a little bit of health reimbursement money back from the state and some other miscellaneous state revenues. And then for our federal revenues and some other revenues, that's function 8 and 9,000. For the 24-25 fiscal year, we budgeted 922,000. Dropped that to about 921,000, and a difference of $487. I currently budgeted our this year's allotment total 122.4. However, keep in mind that during the fiscal year, they can give us a funding adjustment. Most of the times, it's lower than what we normally start the year with. And again, our federal revenues, now that the ESSER funding has gone away, our federal revenues are mainly our Title I, II, and IV programs. On our expense side, starting with personnel, salary, and benefits, that accounts for 57% of our total budget. So for our salary and benefits, I broke that down by what I call the two-digit object code. So you can see that off to the left-hand side, so like administrative salaries fall under object code 110. I'm not going to read across all these line items, but you can see that most of these line items are increasing, obviously, with the contractual increases, we increase our salaries based on those numbers. You will see, just wanted to point out that the district now has its own police force. So in fiscal year 25, the budget was only $15,000. We now have them budgeted under salaries, and of course we took out the amount that we were paying for the county under what I would call function 330, a service. And then down below, you can see all the different benefits that we're contracted to pay out, from life insurance to workers' comp to tuition reimbursement, medical, dental, vision. So you can see in total, our total salary and benefits are going up about $810,429. Looking at our non-personnel expenditures by object code, starting at the top, for purchase professional and technical services, that's what we call object code 300. You can see that we're budgeting for an increase of about $495,000. The majority of that increase is what we're estimating our special education budget to increase by. We have a small increase in purchase property services, or object code 400, of about $16,000. Other purchase services, or object code 500, we're estimating an increase of $820,000, and that's just us estimating an increase in our transportation cost. I will cover in a little bit more detail where that may land because of the bids coming in this Friday. And then our supply line item, we kept flat. Property and equipment, we're projecting a decrease. One, because tech doesn't need to purchase as many items this year, and as well as in the current year budget, we had a line item for school furniture. And then our object codes 8 and 900, there's a decrease there, and that decrease is because, as I mentioned earlier, we did pay off our series of 2021 bond in this current fiscal year. So we had to reduce the revenue side, but we also reduced the expense side for the bond and interest payments. So in total, our non-personnel expenditures, right now we're budgeting an increase of about $880,000. And down below, I'm not going to read all of them, but you might wonder, what is in object code 800? That includes the payments to the intermediate unit, professional educational services, security and safety, employee training and development. And so down across the bottom, it's not all inclusive, but it gives you an idea of what is budgeted under each of those object codes. So as I mentioned earlier, our debt service is decreasing because we have paid off our series of 2021 debt. So you can see the interest there on the first line item, and then the bond principal is on the second line item. And then we also, under the object code 900, we also budget for leases. So you can see there that our lease line item looks like it's going up by about $135,000. But actually what that is the $166,000 is leases for like our staff and laptops. However, I found that the Xerox lease for our copiers was actually budgeted under the 700 category. So I moved that under the 900 where it should be. So it's just me moving the expense around to where it should be. So in this line item, we're looking at a decrease to our budget of about $271,000. One of our big expenses in our budget and in many school districts' budgets are cyber charter school expenditures. You can see for the 25 fiscal year budget, we budget about $4.4 million. For the upcoming fiscal year, we currently have estimated $4.8 million for an increase to our budget of $400,000. I wanted though to provide you with several different scenarios because this is a guessing game when it comes to what's budgeted for cyber charter. So scenario number one, you can see that estimate is using our February 2025 enrollment numbers and using our current tuition rates. If we would keep those number of students, we could potentially need to budget about $5.4 million in cyber charter school costs. Scenario two is what I currently put in the budget. It is using our February 2025 enrollment numbers, removing our graduates. So in 24-25, we have 22 graduates this year, 10 regular education students and 12 special education students, and using our current tuition rates. That's where that $4.8 million comes from. And then scenario number three is if we would leave our enrollments the same as they are as of February 2025, removing graduates based on our February 2025 enrollments, but including a 10% increase in the tuition rate. That comes to about $5.3 million in cyber charter school costs. Or scenario number four is leaving our enrollment as is for 2025, not removing graduates in case we have any incoming students that actually go out to cyber charter schools, and including a 10% tuition increase. And that could potentially make our cyber charter school costs $5.9 million. So this is a really big range to try to budget for. So it is something that we will continue to monitor as this year goes to see where our enrollment is heading. As for transportation, so this is an area that we do not have more concrete number in. 2 bid for full service and 1 just bid for athletics and extracurriculars. We will be analyzing these proposals in the next 2 weeks and doing a cost analysis as to what this means for the district. But in the meantime, we put an estimated increase in transportation costs of the budget of $820,000. We will revise that as soon as we're able to analyze the proposals and see where the costs may fall compared to the current year budget. As for people services, this includes the special education costs. This is a more complex budget, so we are continuing to work down through that budget, so we will bring you better numbers in the coming months. But based on historical, the last 2 years, our special ed costs have gone up about $570,000 a year. So currently, we put a principal in of $570,000 increase. But again, as we go through that budget, we will bring you more up-to-date estimates for that budget. So where does that leave us? So currently, for the 25-26 budget, we are budgeting revenues of about $64.4 million, expenses at $67.1 million, which brings us to a deficit of about $2.7 million. And so some of the increases and decreases to the budget, just to recap, I know I went over them, but just want to recap them here. Some of the main contributions to that is we removed the PCCC grant money, we removed the state reimbursement for the debt. This is positive. We added additional real estate tax revenue. On the expense side, we included the contractual increases in salary and benefits, included an estimated increase in special education costs, as well as transportation, and an increase in our cyber charter school costs. So changes to the expenses was about $2.6 million. And the $2.7 million deficit, if you're wondering, it's about a 2% increase over the 24-25 budget expenditures of $65,419,807 was what we budgeted this year for our expenses. I did want to highlight some of the possible unaccounted for variances in our preliminary budget. So the government came out with this proposal, and again, we is asking the state legislators to fund education. So if we would get what the governor proposed, we could potentially receive an additional $109,000 in basic education funding. Again, he's proposed an increase to our special education funding, which would be about $90,000 we could add to the budget. And once again, he is asking for an increase in the adequacy supplement, and that would come to fruition. We could get an additional about $270,000. Not saying that we're proposing going to the index, but just wanted to put this number out here when we're looking at different ways to fund the $2.7 million deficit. If we were to raise taxes to the index, that would bring in about $1.5 million. We're hearing on the news about, where federal funds going to be. Currently, they are in the budget, but if some reason that they need to be applied, that is about $1.4 million loss in revenue that we would have to take out of our budget. And then transportation subsidy, that has gone up slightly, so I believe that we can put an additional about $144,000 into the budget for that. We talked about interest income. Currently, for the 24-25 school year, I'm estimating it will probably end about $1.3 million. We currently have budgeted $683,000. I left that flat in the 25-26 budget, only because, again, if we start to spend down the reserves, and depending on what the economy does, if the interest rates start to fall, we certainly won't receive in about $1.4 million in interest earnings. And then as we talk, there's a wide range in different scenarios in what we should budget for cyber charter schools. So if we feel that we need to add additional money into that, I'm saying we might need to add anywhere between $400,000 and $940,000 to the budget, depending on our enrollment numbers. So that brings us to
First of all, Mrs. Lentz, it's a lot of numbers. I'm sure you're going to continue to revise as well as off the roundtable, look at the numbers. Transportation is a big increase, but we had to have some RFPs come in for that. as well as cyber charter is a big concern. And what the governor proposes versus what we get, we won't know that number. Remind, I guess, everyone and the public that any money that we have as a surplus doesn't go away. It goes into the district kind of as a savings for projects and other things. But the big numbers are that we're 2.7 million in the hole with these numbers going into the 25-26 school year. So how do we make that up with whatever the budget we adopt? So questions or comments from the floor to Mrs. Lynn?
Mrs. Lentz, on page 9, the cyber charter, you have on here with the 10%, you have a couple of the scenarios with 10% tuition increase. Do we anticipate a 10% increase?
So, if you remember in December, I had presented the cyber charter schools, and I had given you sort of the history over the last several years. So I'll just read them to you. So in the 21-22 fiscal year, we had a 1.8% increase in our tuition rate for regular education. And we had a 6.3% increase in special education tuition rate. In the 21-22 school year, our regular education tuition rate went up 7.1%, and our special education stayed at 6.3%. In 22-23, the regular education tuition rate went up 9.9%, and special education was 7.9%. And then in 23-24, it actually, the regular education tuition rate fell by about 12.4%, and special education tuition went up 5.6%. In the 24-25 year, regular education tuition went up 11.9%, and special education went up 14.8%. So it's been all over the board in the last few years. So kind of just looking at some of the last years where it remained high, that's why I picked a 10% increase as a scenario.
Okay.
One interesting statistic that I found today, I met at length with our special ed department, and I was informed that just this year, 2/3 of the way through, we've had 48 new students come into the district that require IEPs. And that number is over 620 students in our district require special needs of some type. That is not cyber students, but there are 620 students, or about 27% of our student body, requires some type of special education need. Of those 48 students that come in, I would hope that we keep them all forever, but there is a possibility that some of them may not stay with us, and that would increase the number of 239, possibly even higher. And if they leave the district with a special needs IEP, I'm sure the cyber schools will also pick up that IEP designation and cost us more.
Is our audit complete now?
So I just heard from them maybe a week or two ago. They reached out to start the single audit, which is our federal program audit. So it is not yet complete.
We have a projected time frame of that when that might be completed?
I do.
Okay.
I was just by the end of this fiscal year, we can get that out of the way.
Question, if that's okay.
Yes. Mrs. Booth?
I just have a question on the cyber charter funding and how it works out with the PA 363 form, which is very straightforward. We take our expenses, we plug it into this paper, this formula, and we get the amount that we give the cyber schools. Whenever I discovered this form last year as a new board member, I was alarmed once I started comparing our actual budget numbers and the numbers that we are plugging in under special education for our expenses on special education. We have a special education consortium here, which as it was explained to me, we select teachers based on students that we have already that need a special education teacher. However, we bring in lots of students. Last year, I think the number was 56 students from other districts, and we educate them here. And then we share those expenses with the other districts. So then there is an income portion that comes along with the consortium. In the end, it's supposed to be saving us, but on this form, the amount of money that we budget specifically for the consortium just gets directly put onto this form, and therefore it falsely inflates our actual expenses for special education. And then that gets divided out, and that goes to the cyber charter schools. And we have approximately 24% of our student body here in Big Spring going to alternative schooling. Some of those are homeschooled, but about 24% of our overall amount of students in this district have chosen an alternative method. Some are going to Keola, some are going to the cyber charter schools, and some are homeschooled. But that's a rather large percentage. And so when we're looking at just the cyber schools, these amounts of money it's a significant amount of money that the consortium is inflating this number. And is there a way to separate that out so we can run it as a separate entity so that the income that comes from other districts, I mean, technically the amount of money we are spending on special education and including the consortium here on this form is other districts' students' expenses, and we are getting reimbursed for that. So is there a way to separate that off?
So that is something I'll have to look into. I do not have the answer for that, but yes, I see where you're coming from. And I don't know how much people know about this topic, but previously when I started school business, your PDE 363, you first did it on your budget, and then later in the year, you revised your PDE 363 based on actual. Because a lot of times your budget is usually a little bit higher than your actual. Then it came out that the cyber charter schools enforced the law and said you have to develop your tuition rates based on your budget. So yes, that's a delicate balance. You want to budget enough, but you also don't want to over budget because your tuition rates are based on budget, not actual numbers. And then in this scenario with us running the consortium, our numbers are going to be higher, and I can look into see if there's anything we can do to run that separately so that revenue that we're getting in can somehow maybe be taken account that we're not going to penalize with PDE 363.
Good. Yeah, from what I understand, the consortium is a wonderful thing that our district is doing, but I don't think it should come at the expense of the Big Spring taxpayers to then have to pay out more to the charter schools because of that good deed we're doing. I have one more question if I'm not interrupting anyone. Go ahead. So I just have a little more, I would just like a little more explanation on the rent and sink fund payment. So this nearly $500,000 is now, we're losing that as income that was associated with a bond that we had. So then when we look over at our expenses, we only lost somewhere around $400,000, I think it was, in total expenses. I mean, I'm assuming maybe some of the other ones are ballooning this year, that's not, somehow we're losing more in income from that bond that we paid off than what we are losing in expense, which seems interesting. So if you could explain that a little bit more.
So I will have to bring you the numbers because I certainly don't have them memorized, but I'm assuming it's what you said. So now that we paid that debt off, the other debt, a lot of times PFM likes to wrap around that debt. So our payments might be going up slightly. That's why you're not seeing the same amount on the expense side. And I can certainly bring you those numbers at the next planning.
So at this point, we are just looking at numbers and trying to prepare for what our tax rate will be, and a timeline is we need to be thinking about that seriously in May. Dr. Grante, help me, we need to adopt a budget by the beginning, late May, before June, so it can lay for 30 days before it's adopted at the second meeting in June. Am I somewhat correct on that?
Preliminary adoption in May, final adoption in June.
So this is March. A lot of work to be done and more numbers to detail and look at between March and May. But at some point, we will be given a recommendation and also look at the costs, and things may get a little more narrow between expenses and revenue between now and then. This is just the first big overview.
That is correct.
Would you agree with that, Ms. Lynn?
Yep, we are going to go deeper into the expense and revenue side and bring you updates.
So one thing like, for example, the transportation, we just kind of got hit with that. That will be looked at, discussed, revised, hopefully contained to the best we can, but we now have some numbers to at least draft from. Other comments or concerns from the board?
I do. I don't have any questions. I just had some notations I'd like to make. So the FY24, it appears as though we're ending with a surplus of 5.1 million. It's important to note that plus or minus 2 to 3% is considered balanced. It's also important to note that the numbers indicate we came in at 8.27%. I do have, I've done some calculating, and plus 3% would have been 1.87 million. So anything over that amount was excess taxpayer money collected that was not needed. That excess and comes to an amount of $3.3 million. I also understand the need to contribute to the future project reserve. So the question is, how much do we pull from the reserve to balance the budget? Do we raise taxes, and what percent of increase do we raise? I will also point out that 2.7 million deficit is a lot to cover from our reserve, especially when we are aware of large projects which we have set aside, such as the stadium and things. I, for one, have been following the surplus very, very closely over the last 12, 13 years, and 9 of the last 9 years straight, we've been well over the 3% balanced, that we consider a balanced budget. I'm of the opinion that we should take some of that surplus and apply it to the expenses, as it was taxpayer money that was, I mean, the last 3 years alone, 22, 9% over, 23, 7.6% over, 24%, 8.2, or 24 was 8.27. I mean, those are all well over 3%. I'm just going to throw some numbers out here. I would like to see 0.5, 1%, and 1.5% increase, just to see what the numbers look like.
I would agree, Mrs. Lenz, those are good numbers to at least start with. And then somehow we as a board will decipher that, as well as hopefully the budget will become closer to actual. But again, the budget is a guess. We know that.
That is Dr. Brocky and I's goal, to minimize the variance.
Yes.
I would like to add, I would like to see a 0%, work it up so that we can see 0%, and we can do something with this 5.1 million that we came in extra from over a year ago. This was from the school year, the fiscal year that ended last summer, and it took us until now to find out that we have 5.1 million extra dollars than what we thought we did. So I think we should probably also do a 0% increase and work that up and use some of this excess money.
Any other comments from this portion of the Finance Committee? Mrs. Lenz, thank you for your work. I know you have a lot more to do. It'll be a busy couple months. Do we have any other items for the floor for Finance Committee? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn the Finance Committee?
Motion.
Motion, Mrs. Booth, second by Mr. Myers. There is no discussion. I assume everyone votes in the affirmative to adjourn the Finance Committee meeting for March 17th.